And welcome, folks. This is Joint Justice Oversight Committee. It is October 9th. It's our meeting. We are running a little bit behind schedule, but we will catch up. We're going to start this morning with our introduction with our new interim commissioner of Department of Corrections, John Murad. So, Commissioner, welcome. So, if you want to get into one of those hot seats, way down at the bottom. And I'm assuming this may be your first time testifying before a legislative committee?
No, I did so once before in my role in Burlington.
So one of the processes that we always do, we always make sure that the person who's testifying identifies himself. We do that for the record. And then one of the process sometimes is the person. And sometimes we just have the person do the complete testimony. Other times people will ask questions as we go along. So I don't know which would work the best for you.
I will do whatever you want. I'm here to just introduce myself, but then to take any questions any of you have. So I don't have testimony that has been prepared.
Okay, so I think what we'll do is ask questions as we go along. And for folks who are on Zoom, I can't see you because we have this document up. So I will wait. I will rely on Megan to let us know. So, Commissioner Murad.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. My name is John Murad. I am the interim commissioner for the Vermont Department of Corrections. And I'm really, really grateful for this opportunity to speak with you. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be in this interim role, having been appointed by the governor in August. So it's been a short time so far. I'm still learning a lot. I hope that you will all be gentle with me insofar as what I do or don't yet know about this department. But I'm really excited by what I have learned so far. I previously had a long 20-year plus career in law enforcement. I started as a police officer and then detective and then sergeant and then ultimately assistant commissioner in the New York City Police Department. And then I moved to Burlington, which is where I was born. I got to come home. My parents live in Underhill. I grew up in Underhill and went to Mount Mansfield and got to come home, which I'd wanted to do for a very long time because an opportunity was presented at the Burlington Police Department. I took a job as the deputy chief of operations there in 2018. And then I was the chief starting in 2020, a tumultuous time in law enforcement, as everybody knows. And I very much loved that job, but I was prepared to move on and did. And I happened to be unemployed when Commissioner Demmel moved on to new opportunities. And the governor approached me and asked me if I would step into this role. And I said yes with a great deal of enthusiasm and excitement, too.
Oh, it stays.
Well, I hope so, too. I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with where we can go. And I consider myself to be an optimist, but not of the half full versus half empty variety, but rather of this is where the glass is, and I think we can get it fuller. And I believe we can get this glass fuller. I think that there are wonderful things that are already underway at the Department of Corrections, wonderful things that I would like to keep going, and also things that I think we can do with a slightly different emphasis and focus, including right now, I think there's a role to play in the distress that a lot of our communities are experiencing around pervasive disorder and issues of how our public spaces feel to members of our community. I also think that there's been incredible work done with regard to the staffing crisis that the Department of Corrections found itself in over the past several years, but there's more work to be done on that, and I'm eager to see that through. I'm also eager to see how we can improve the way in which we care for the people who are in our custody or under our supervision, the degree to which we can develop and invest in additional forms of treatment beyond the medically assisted treatment that we have, I think, done a very good job of implementing and really pioneering compared to a lot of other departments of corrections around the country. And so those are some avenues for us. that I'm really excited to be able to explore. But mostly, I truly believe in public service. I really believe in public service with a specific emphasis on keeping people safe. That's what I did for 20 years of career. And I see this as a furtherance of that mission. And I'm really eager to work with the people, the amazing people that I've found so far at the Department of Corrections. Just really great staff, really great leadership there. And I've been to all the facilities and all the field offices, and I've met terrific people in those roles as well. So that's, I really do want to open for questions and not just sort of go on about where I am or where I've been.
So I know you've been there a very short period of time, but what, is there anything that really stands out as what is a surprise to you? In terms of, you know, we all have a perception of what DOC is until we actually start.
Sure.
Was there anything that really came to light that was a surprise to you?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I think the two things that hadn't really occurred to me, even interacting with DOC as a sort of front end user, somebody who had brought people into DOC. The facilities that I had been to were only two. I had been to CRCF, the Chittenden facility, especially when I was onboarding as a deputy chief of operations and was actually bringing people there, including males at that time, for incapacitation or for overnights until arraignment. And then, of course, I had been to Swanton as well for the same reason, as dropping off prisoners. But I had no real understanding of what the department did. And I think for me, one of the two biggest learning items have been things that I'm not entirely certain our population knows, although I'm certain everybody around this table does, that we are a unified system, and that by not having sheriff's jails, we are in a very different position than the vast majority of other states. There's only 5 others that have a unified system. And having a place where we have detainees and post-conviction inmates makes for a different kind of system. It makes for different kinds of opportunities, although also different kinds of challenges. That's one piece. And the degree to which our detained population has really skyrocketed over the past couple of years. That's one piece. And then the other piece is the fact that while our possessing a unified system is very different than most other states, being part of the Agency for Human Services is totally unique compared to other states. And that too, I think, has a really important emphasis. The sine qua non of what we do in corrections is going to be custody, is going to be keeping people who have to be detained or incarcerated. But the idea of having an additional emphasis that is based on approaching that as a human services role and not just a public safety role is unique to Vermont and is a very important emphasis that I think is really driven home by where we sit in the state's governmental organizational chart. So those are things that I hadn't known before and that I was glad to learn. Also, simply the scope of this job. It is a huge organization. I believe by headcount, or at least by authorized headcount, is the largest single entity in state government. It has a commensurate budget owing to that, just because of the number of people that it has. The fact that there are 6 facilities, that there are 12 field offices, that is a very large enterprise. And to make sure that it is running in those 3 very distinct spheres, whether it's the field offices and probation and parole, whether it is the facilities and a jail/prison role, or whether it's the central office and the great team that I hope is always available to you all and is answerable to you and gives you the things that you need and works on policy and innovation, that central office. Those are 3 distinct pieces that have to interrelate, work together, and be encouraged in equal measure. Those are things that I see as sort of my immediate focus over the next several months to really make sure that everybody feels like they're pulling in the same direction in those 3 distinct operational areas.
Questions, Topper?
I'm going to say the past year and a half, we've talked about healthcare within the institution. And we've had people come in here and tell us everything is going fine. From your perspective, and I don't know if you can answer this question or not, when a person leaves the institution, Are we on top of now? Are we on top of making sure that prescriptions that the offender had within the institution are now that they're able to get those prescriptions right away when they get out of the institution? That was a big deal. That's my first question.
So the simple answer is that we are not doing it as well as we want to do. The specifics of an answer like that, I would defer to staff. But I will say that what we're trying to do is work on a Medicaid agreement where we would be able to help get people on Medicaid prior to release. There are exceptions in Medicaid. Medicaid is not to be used for people who are incarcerated, but there are exceptions for people who are a short period away, 90 days, I believe, from release. And we are working on a system whereby we would be able to enroll those folks, get them that kind of care so that we have not just a warm handoff, but a hot handoff to care providers in the community, and to ensure that we are able to say, we're releasing you, but we're releasing you with the things that you've needed inside and that you're going to continue to need on the outside, and you'll have quick and immediate access to that. That's absolutely the goal. We are doing some of that. I think that we do as good a job as we can right now, but I don't think that, well, let me correct myself. We do a good job of it, but it's not as good a job as we can, which is why we want to build these other kinds of programs and make certain that we do the kind of job that we want to be able to do.
How long do you think it's going to take to accomplish that?
It's
been going on for a long while.
Sure. That's a terrific question. I know that the Medicaid waiver, the 1115 program, is something that is a real priority for our team. It's being worked on both by Aviva Teva and by Isaac Deo. And it is something that I couldn't give you an actual date, but I believe our target is the coming calendar year.
Also, Topper, they have to work with Diva in terms of getting the whole electronic system up. So the goal last session, the goal that I heard in our committee was January 1st was the goal to have it up and running. But
That's what I was trying to, are we on track for that?
I would defer to staff on that. I apologize for that. I believe we are. I do think that there have been some technological hurdles that we're addressing. And those may have put us a little bit past that January target, but that is still what we're striving for.
That takes care of the healthcare piece. The other piece that has been haunting us for a long time as well is the staffing problem.
Yeah.
I see on TV the advertisements, wonderful advertisements. I've looked at the chart in terms of from 2021 or whatever it was up to now. And we're still not there.
No.
Do you think it is possible to get to the point where people in the institutions, the people that are working there, are safe, number one, and number two, they're not exhausted from long shifts that they have to do?
Yeah. Well, I think they're safe now. I don't believe that we have a system that is rendering staff or people who are inside the system to be unsafe. That's certainly not something that we would do anything we can to fix that. We've created a special division that does that deals with hospitalizations in order to lessen the burden of call outs for hospitals, both on facility staff and on field staff. But they also, when not employed in the hospitalizations, are going to facilities that need additional help at a given moment. Overall, we've gone from being well over 30% down a few years ago to right now, I believe this morning, as a whole, the facilities are down just over 14%. And that's pretty remarkable. Is it a finishing point? Absolutely not. We still want to go farther than that. The department as a whole is down about 12.2%, but the facilities are 14.6 as of this morning's report. Central and field are not down nearly as much. What is the new normal is a big question for America across the board, across sectors, whether we're talking about education or whether we're talking about healthcare or whether we're talking about public safety and corrections. We don't know what that new normal may be. The notion of getting back to 100% staffing may not be achievable in those professions that I just mentioned. And those professions are all sort of wrestling with that. What is going to be the new normal? I will tell you that 14.6% down is not acceptable and is not going to be our new normal, and not a new normal that we allow. But are we ever going to be able to get to that 100 picture? I don't know. We're going to strive for it. I think that the department as a whole has done a really amazing job of getting from, cutting the deficit in half, essentially, the staffing deficit in half. That's remarkable. We have work to do. There are some that are a little bit more understaffed than others. So that 14.6 that I gave is the overall for all 6 facilities. Northern, for example, has had some more pronounced staffing challenges. They're nowhere near what they were a few years ago, but we are also running into higher populations. We have larger populations inside than we have in the past. And therefore, even though we're better staffed, we're also asking a little more of folks insofar as the total number of people who are in their custody and care. What have we done about it? We have worked on different schedules. We have worked on different pay scales. We negotiate actively and work with the union actively. I've met with Steve Howard. I thought it was a productive meeting. I was grateful for his attention and his time. We are also, working to make certain that our people are compensated fairly. By certain measures, when incorporating overtime, our people are, I believe, the number 4 compensated in the country. So we're doing what we can in that respect. We're also advertising in these localities. We've established new positions that are responsible for each specific facility's recruitment efforts in order to bring aboard people in those communities to the facilities. I attended a graduation of recruits back in September that was really remarkable. I was really impressed by the young people, and not all young people. We have people with a little more tenure and a little more mileage under the wheels as well. But I was impressed by the people that we're bringing into this department as new correctional officers. So we're doing all the things that we can. We're eager for any assistance that we could get, or any advice that we could get, or new ideas that we could get, including from this body. But it's a priority for us.
I guess I want more. You mentioned the northern part of the state. My understanding is that X amount of people working in the prison provide safety for the workers. So, let's take Newport as an example. Is the number of people that should be employed there to make sure that the staff is safe and the prisoners are safe? Is that number 80?
I don't know what that number would be for the facility.
All right. I have information that it says that would be a safe working place at 80. And there's 50 there now, approximately.
So if I may.
That's why I asked the question about safety, because we've heard this for a long time here. We've heard about the shifts, the 16-hour shifts, et cetera. We've heard the commissioner, the past commissioner, come in and say, we're doing everything we can about that. We've had people that work in these places come in and say everything is fine, everything is terrible. And for me, sitting around this table, I want somebody to assure me, and I'm sure the rest of the committee feels the same way, that both the people incarcerated and the staff that work with them are safe.
Mm-hmm. So I can't comment on the idea of 80. I don't know enough about that question to comment on the idea of 80 versus 50. What I can say is that the question you first asked was about 2 things. It was about safety and about whether or not people are being overworked. Yeah. And I believe that we are safe. I believe that we are making certain to have sufficient numbers of people on shifts that we are capable of maintaining safety for staff and for inmates alike. But is there exhaustion? Are there issues with overwork? I do think that there are. I think that there are times where we're asking a lot of people, including that new division that I talked about. Some of their travel times are pretty egregious. And we have people who travel 2-3 hours to get to a location. Oftentimes we will give hotels for folks that are going to do that, especially if they're working more than one shift at a location that's far from where they start, their home. And so that is a factor. And the numbers that you gave, I want to draw a distinction in those numbers. Again, not saying that I know what the right number is, but I do think that there's a distinction to be made between whether or not those numbers are about making certain that people are not working multiple shifts or doing amounts of overtime that may be challenging versus whether or not those numbers equal safe versus unsafe. I don't believe that latter is the case, but I do believe that we have issues around whether or not our people are getting the time they need, the rest time that they need, et cetera.
Okay, thank you very much.
The two facilities that have had the most pressure, staffing pressure, is Newport. And that's where if there was fully staffed, would be about 80 folks. Right now, what we're hearing is 50. In Springfield, that's the other facility that's always been understaffed. To fully staffed Springfield, you're talking about 100 to 110 folks, and they tend to run 60 folks. So those are the two facilities that really are feeling more of the pressure for that. So that opens up a question that I have in terms of what happens within that facility when it's short-staffed. We know that the staff is putting in a lot of time, overtime, but what happens with the population, that's incarcerated population, and the function of that facility? Does it stay and does it go into lockdown? And if so, how long? What are the procedures that are put in place? Do you know?
So when we have staffing challenges at a location, the sort of order that we do is we try to hire to address that, bringing aboard new recruits, getting them through their training, and then making it so that they are now independent and can fill shifts on their own. The facility itself may ask management positions to do jobs that they aren't necessarily doing. If they are trained and able to do that. We have people even from Central who do that, specifically this division that I've talked about. We fly them in to locations in order to cover shifts. And then, yes, there comes a point at which if the staffing is still not where we want it to be, we may have to do things like lockdowns. Lockdowns can also be driven by health issues, so that we end up with, obviously during the pandemic, we've had a resurgence of COVID in a couple of facilities. Just as it comes around, I think we're all going to start seeing it a little bit in the public and in the schools, et cetera. But that can cause this too. But a lockdown, the goal there is to make it as short as possible and as brief as possible. But that is a mechanism. If you have an overnight where because somebody has called out unexpectedly, or because there are an unanticipated number of transports that are required, whether for hospitalizations or for other reasons, you may end up with a situation where suddenly you don't have the number that you need to do both posts and floats around for relief, and a lockdown may be necessary in cases like that. It's something that is to be kept as brief as possible.
So that opens up a question here about medical transports, because there was, I know in the last, let's say, year or two, that there was a real focus on that from central office to take the pressure off the line staff to, if an inmate has to be hospitalized, transported, the inmate needs to have a couple officers with them. And I know that DOC has been trying to take the pressure off correctional officers and having a special team.
Yes.
And what's the name of that team?
The Central Operations Division, or COD. Initially, it was also called by COS because it's Central Operations Specialists. And so sometimes those terms will be used interchangeably, but it is now a division, and the division itself is COD. And yes, COD is actually covering about 74% of our hospitalizations right now. That's with, they're not fully staffed according to what they are budgeted for and what we have. part of the challenge is that anytime we bring somebody into COD, we are most likely taking that person from a facility. There are other ways as well. We can hire direct for it, although they still have to then go through training at the academy and things. But the truth is, if we're going to not only use it as a hospitalization team, but also use it as backfill, then we want people who've been in the facilities. It would be challenging to bring somebody in, hire them directly for COD, put them through the academy so they're nominally trained, but then expect them to go and work a shift at Springfield when they've never done that before. We want people who have some degree of experience in the facilities. They are handling 74% of hospitalizations right now. I believe that if we could expand that unit by about 8 to 9 people, we could probably get that up to about the 90% range of hospitalizations. But 8 to 9 people, or maybe more, maybe 10 to 12, means 10 to 12 people. That's 2 people from each facility. Just with a shakedown math, which wouldn't necessarily work out, it wouldn't be as statistically representative as that. But 2 people from each facility is a challenge for the facilities right now. So the question is, is more good done in the big picture, including for people's workloads at the facilities themselves, by taking 2 folks out of a facility, putting them in the COD, but now 1 or 2 shifts are short a person until we can hire again for that role. 1 shift feeling a little bit short and denuded may, in fact, not be as overall impactful for the organization as being able to actually have not just the majority, but the vast majority of hospitalizations taken on by COD instead. These are the kinds of questions that we sort of have to juggle. Which one of these is going to be the best use of personnel? Which one of them also affords personnel the most opportunity for growth and development? That's incredibly important, especially as we seek to improve retention. And so there are questions that we sort of deal with on a day-to-day basis.
So the CODs are there for the whole system.
Affirmative.
And I'm hearing that they are physically placed in a facility, or are they placed in central office and then go?
They're central office employees. They are counted in the central office head count, but they deploy regularly to both hospitals around the state. I think there's 8 total plus 10 if you count the 2 that are in New Hampshire. They also can go as far away as Albany and Boston at times for certain kinds of hospitalizations. And when not being used in that role, they are used to fill in at facilities that are feeling the crunch in a particularly pronounced way.
So how do you determine, say you've got 6 people and you've got 4 facilities, they each have a person that is going to a hospital.
Mhm.
They need 2 people.
Mhm.
How do you determine which facility is not going to be covered? But you'll have to pull someone, you'll have to pull that COD division from that particular facility. Is that correct?
That is, or we from the field as well. So sometimes it's a matter of using field staff, finding volunteers at the field level in order to handle those hospitalizations rather than pulling from the facility. But otherwise I can't give you a specific rubric. It is going to be done on a case-by-case ad hoc basis. Are there, how deployed is COD right now? How available is COD and its members? I think there's actually 14 right now who are active. And I think 2 of them right now are not available owing to health reasons. And so we've got 12. Those 12, as you pointed out, ma'am, each person needs 2. So if we have those 12, that's 6 individuals hospitalized. They're now fully deployed. And how do we make certain that we can actually cover overages as well? Sometimes it means bringing people from the facility. Sometimes it's bringing people from the field. As I said, 74% is what they've been able to accomplish so far as a percentage of hospitalization cases. I think we can get higher than that, especially if we bring some folks in to expand the unit a bit. But expansion comes at the expense potentially of both the field and the facilities, and we have to figure out whether or not that's possible.
I do. Thanks for being here, Commissioner.
Thank you, sir.
Bob Norris, Town of Elberg in Glendale County and Franklin County. Probably don't know if this has of yet, but I do have a question that's been brought to my attention in reference to a meeting that was held at St. Albans with Judge. A representative from DOC and State's Attorney's Office, whatever else, were asked to be present. And it was in reference to the transportation of prisoners. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, because I wasn't there and quite possibly you weren't.
I was not, sir.
But being somewhat familiar with the transportation of prisoners and law enforcement, I know that for decades, DOC, who have individuals in their care and custody, has been moving those individuals to family court here and civil court, so on and so forth, for decades, I might add. And the sheriff's offices have been moving individuals to courts for criminal purposes. Well, I've been informed, and I could have been informed wrong, that during the course of this meeting, and I don't know because of staffing issues or whatever that may be, that DOC explained to the judicial system, to the judge, that they don't have the authority to move individuals from DOC, their custody, to courts. And that courts in general. Basically, it's been history that they've always moved detainees or whatever else. And I know it comes later on down in the packet here, or this afternoon. I wanted to ask this question now because you probably won't be here. But I see where we had an agreement with the federal government, ICE, marshals, that says that we will move their detainees to courts, hospitals, whatever else, simply by checking a box. I guess I was curious as to now all of a sudden, after decades of doing this, providing this service, by DOC is saying that we don't have the authority to move these individuals no more.
I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to comment. I don't know the answer to that. I wasn't at that meeting, and it involves history that you're clearly very familiar with and I'm not. And so I'm afraid I'll have to get that information for you, and I'll either rewatch or get the transcript from this meeting, understand exactly what your question is, and take it to the folks who can answer it.
That'd be greatly appreciated if I could get some form of a response as to what's accurate or inaccurate, or whatever else. If you get it back to, say, Megan, and disseminate that information to everyone on the committee here. Thank you.
Questions? Others?
So you talked about the 14% staffing shortage, and it's in different facilities. I just want to make sure that what you're saying is that there's 14% of full-time positions that aren't filled. It's not that you're having folks work overtime to fill these positions.
No, that is correct. 14.6% is the number for the facilities as a whole. And that would include, for example, if every single caseworker position was filled, then the percentage that is experienced by the COs themselves could be higher than that. So this is for the facilities, and furthermore, that's all 6 facilities aggregated. So the aggregated picture for all 6 facilities is that they are 14.6% understaffed right now. That is about full-time employees. That's not what we can or can't make up with overtime. The fact of the matter is that in order to function, I don't think that 14% is something that really is functional. I think that we have to make up via overtime, getting closer to who knows what the number was. Is the number 100% is necessary for function, or is 100% a picture that is also healthier for folks with regard to never ever having to work any overtime, for example, and therefore 80% or 90% or 95% is what it is to be functional without any overtime at all. I don't know the math on that. I think the math ultimately is that there's always some degree of overtime because people are entitled to leave, and people are entitled to call out sick, and people are entitled to get married and go on honeymoons, et cetera. And so that can happen. But right now what we're experiencing is 14.6 of full-time employees, and that is not accounting for the overtime that we do or bringing other employees like COD into the facility.
The overtime isn't a small group of folks in DOC that are volunteering to do it, or these folks that are essentially conscripted, you got to work.
It's both. It's both. There is mandatory overtime that is required, and then there's also voluntary overtime. And as in any sort of workforce, there's folks who really like that overtime, and you will see very fancy trucks in parking lots, and that's indicative of folks who probably have bills that they're trying to pay. And you'll also see those who really are, no, my work shift is my work shift, and I'd like to keep it that way. And unfortunately, that's not possible for everybody.
In terms of overtime, do you all have a policy that takes, I don't want to say burnout, but essentially safety into consideration, as in you're not going to require a PO, and this is a specific person that I spoke to, have them do 4 days of 16 hours.
4 days of 16 hours. I have heard that that is happening. I don't know what the policy says insofar as whether or not there are rules that can't go over X period of time or can't do, that one cannot work 23 hours in a 24-hour cycle. I don't know whether those rules exist or not. I can find out for you and let you know. And bringing it up to me is something that makes me realize I'd like to know too.
And I just have one other question, just in terms of the inmate population. Now it's essentially equivalent to pre-COVID levels. What's the staffing equivalent? Is it equivalent or is it radically different from pre-COVID?
It's different. I don't believe that it's fully equivalent, but I don't believe that we were 100% staffed prior to the pandemic either. However, I'm saying believe. I don't know for sure, and so I can find that out for you. But I don't believe that the pandemic caused the staffing situation, but I think it greatly exacerbated it. It drove it to levels that had never before been seen. But what was it prior to the pandemic? I don't know that answer. I do know that you're correct. We're about where we were. We're still a little bit lower than we were pre-pandemic. One of the challenges for us is the mixture of that population. The detainee population, which is in this presentation, is much larger than it has been. And that brings different kinds of challenges.
Are there any questions from folks, Megan, on Zoom? So we've got a lot of.
Actually,
Martin does? Okay. Martin, go for it. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. It's good to see you in this different role, Commissioner. So just wondering if you have any plans on how to address remote hearings and how to try to accommodate that. And it's in the broader context that one of the causes we're understanding for the court backlog, and we do want to move cases through, particularly of the detainees, is getting people to court. And that means transport deputies. We had a long conversation last meeting about that, but also remote hearings. And we've run into trouble or the courts have run into trouble over the years on staffing, and I think the technology is taken care of, but I just would like your vision on how to try to accommodate making sure we're getting people to court, be it by transport or by remote hearings.
Thanks, sir. I think some of that ties in at least a little bit to Senator Norris's question too, and I think I'm going to have to plead a certain amount of the same lack of knowledge about it right now. It's my understanding that the telecommunications aspect of it is controlled by the court, even though it's housed in our facilities. We're open to expanding that and to having a greater amount of that kind of remote access, although it is going to be somewhat contingent on our staffing, right? Every person that needs to sit in that space with someone who's attending court virtually is a person who can't be on the floor or can't be doing a float rotation. And so we do have to accommodate that and account for that. But with regard to, for example, transportation, I don't know the answer for your question, sir, any more than I knew, unfortunately, the answer for Senator Norris's. Those are things that I will find out in the same way for him as I will for you. If you ask my vision, I mean, our vision is to make a system in which we are facilitating everybody's access to court, that we're getting people through this system as quickly as possible. I think all of us have an interest as Vermonters in undoing this backlog that has been largely created by the pandemic, but then exacerbated by larger numbers of people who are committing malfeasant acts and bringing themselves into contact with the criminal justice system. And so how do we address that in a way that ultimately, hopefully, I believe, through rapid and vigorous accountability, will actually diminish those numbers? That's a priority for us. We want to be a part of that conversation and of that end goal.
Yeah, and just real quick follow-up is I mainly want to put that on your radar, that the getting people to court from DOC is a very high priority, certainly at least for the House Judiciary Committee, and probably, I'm assuming, the Senate Judiciary Committee as well. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else, Megan? So, Is that something, Chair? Yes.
Oh, I just wanted to know that DOC has,
Just like,
yes, Haley's on regular communications for DOC. For years, DOC did facilitate access to civil and family court in terms of transports, but it's never been transports for criminal court. So I just wanted to clarify that for the record.
it was one of the sheriffs that were
Yes.
doing the pitching. So I have a couple more questions, and one is a shift that sort of sparked from Bob Norris, Senator Norris's question about ICE detainees. And I know our committee sent a letter to the governor's office in August. We knew that the current, and people have used different terminology, the previous contract, the previous MOU, the previous writer was expiring at the end of August. And we had some concerns in terms of testimony we received from DOC in terms of the operations within DOC. And I'm just going to summarize real quick the letter that we sent to the governor in terms of what we were asking that the administration would look at in renegotiating. If we did renegotiate a new contract or rider. We wanted to make sure that our correctional facilities were sufficiently resourced and that the staff wasn't subject to undue operational straining by ICE detainees coming in and the inflow of folks in and out. There wasn't always proper notification from ICE that they were going to pull some detainees out. Could happen at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And that puts some strain in terms of that change onto our correctional officers in the facilities. So we wanted at least a 24-hour notice. We wanted to make sure that there was legal representation provided to the detainees and active foreign language services. And that the agency complies with all state laws and policies when there is an ICE detainee, as well as reimbursement of costs. So that was our request, administration. We didn't hear anything back from the administration per se in terms of how these were addressed. We do anticipate at our October 27th meeting, we hope to have possibly Jay Johnson or someone from the 5th floor to come in and give us more detailed conversation about this. We're not really prepared to do that today because this afternoon we'll also have our legal counsel, Ben Novogrodsky, go over the contracts. But I just wanted to do a high level question and answer with you in terms of, can you share with us, there has been a new rider approved, is my understanding. And can you share with us what has been addressed in terms of our concerns, what has not been addressed, what broadly is in that rider?
I can, not knowing all your concerns other than what you just sort of
It
explained.
predated you.
Yes.
I want to be clear. This letter predated you coming on.
We signed, essentially they're renegotiations, but they're really extensions. They're signage with both of agreements with both the U.S. Marshals and with United States Customs and Border Patrol. The Immigrations and Customs Enforcement comes under the Marshals contract for the most part. Although immigration detainees may come in from any number of groups. An ATF agent might bring in an immigration detainee, but they are going to be brought in under the auspices of an immigration detainer and then under one of those two agreements that we have. Those agreements we did renegotiate them with regard to pricing, to costs. The fees are now higher and larger than many of our neighboring states, for example, are getting. A component of that too is that because as a unified system, we don't have sheriff's departments. In the vast majority of other places, immigration detainees are held in sheriff's jails, not in prisons. We ensure that anybody coming into our system is treated exactly like everybody else with regard to medical checks, with regard to language access, with regard to ensuring that that person is safe and secure and held appropriately. We also ensure that if an attorney is identified for an individual, that attorney has access to that individual. And we have done what we can to ensure that our partners in the advocacy community know who is in our system. Anybody is available on the inmate locator, but of course, if you don't know the name of the person that you're looking for, that can be challenging. We share the names of immigration detainees with the advocacy community so that they can take the next steps to ensure access to due process. A significant component of the governor's rationale for maintaining this relationship and keeping the agreements with those federal partners is the idea that immigration detainees here in the state of Vermont are able to access the due process that is part of Vermont's both ethos and our history. I think we have seen that judges in Vermont are taking seriously their responsibility to ensure due process rights for people who are in federal detention. And we want to ensure that that's happening here so that we know that it is, as opposed to whether it happens in other locations and we don't know. That is a component of it. There's also the component that these relationships are not merely about immigration detainees. They are about the majority of federal detainees are not immigration detainees. They're people who are being detained for federal crimes. And those partnerships remain very important to law enforcement in Vermont and to ensuring that we are able to work with law enforcement agencies that sometimes are able to produce results that we don't get with local prosecution or local government or local enforcement. I know during my time as chief of police in Burlington, I was incredibly grateful for the very close relationship that I had with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, with the ATF and with the DEA. And those kinds of relationships are also facilitated by the ability to take in federal detainees, not for immigration, but for other kinds of things. And again, those non-immigration detainees are the majority of our federal detainees.
So for those ICE detainees, not the federal detainees, criminal, but the ICE ones, who is DOC responsible to follow federal regulations and policies when that person is being held?
We follow our own policies. We also work with the feds to make certain that we're following their regulations. I don't know entirely what you mean by the question.
Well, we have state laws,
Mhm.
procedures for when person's being held. So does the rider specifically say that our DOC personnel enforce state laws and regulations in terms of overseeing the ICE detainees? Or are they required to do federal requirements for that? And if they're doing the federal, how do we ensure that the state laws and regulations are also complied with?
Yeah, I think that the answer to that would probably be nuanced sufficiently that I'd want to consult with our team about it. What I can say is what I said at the beginning. We ensure that anybody coming into our system gets the same kinds of care and access and intake processing as anyone. And so that's one piece, but the nuances that you're describing, I'd want to get back with the team in order to get those answers for you, ma'am.
That might be something we can follow up on October 27th. And how does the new contract ensure that DOC staff isn't overburdened by what they're asking for ICE detainees? Because I know in the old part, a facility could deny an ICE detainee if the facility was overcrowded to begin with Vermont offenders. How, is there assurance that DOC isn't going to be overburdened?
Yes, and we
What are those assurances?
we can and we do deny. We have denied intake owing to capacity issues. We have, there's a hard number with the marshals, but it applies to the marshals, not to the riders. So agencies that are on the rider part of the marshals agreement are subject to capacity. And we have refused to take in detainees owing to capacity.
ICE detainees.
Immigration detainees and other detainees as well, although the threshold for US Marshal detainees, specifically from the marshals, is quite high. I don't think we've ever touched it.
But I think the focus was more the ICE detainees, not the federal marshals. So there's been situations where a superintendent of one of our facilities has said no to
Yes,
an ICE detainee because of overcrowding.
yes,
Has that superintendent been backed up by central office?
certainly will be as far as I'm concerned. But I believe I have no knowledge that there was any sort of disciplinary issue in the past. It's a component of our expectation, and we're going to prioritize the capacity issues and operational issues that we've got.
The question wasn't so much in terms of disciplinary. My question was, it really puts a lot of pressure on one individual, who's the superintendent of the facility, to say no to ICE, to hold an ICE detainee. And I just wonder, having that much pressure on one person to say no to the federal government.
Yeah.
That's my concern, that that person is.
I know that superintendent.
Themselves.
Yeah, understood. I know that superintendent has on more than one occasion, and therefore I believe that he feels supported in that, and he's done it. I would encourage him to do it again when he feels that need.
So one of the facilities that are used to house ICE detainees, is it just St. Albans and the women's facility?
Immigration detainees are predominantly at St. Albans, Northwest, and at CRCF in Chittenden, the women's facility. There may be instances in which federal detainees and immigration detainees end up at other facilities for some brief period of time, but predominantly they are at the facility in Swanton and the facility in South Burlington.
So I have another question. When you mentioned the Chittenden facility, and I know the numbers of incarcerated and detained women has increased,
Yes.
which will put pressure on the ICE detainees. Has the Chittenden facility said no to ICE detainees?
That I'm not certain of. We have a new superintendent there. The previous superintendent had been there for a very long time. I don't know whether she ever said no. I don't believe the new superintendent has, but he hasn't necessarily had occasion to. That said, we did experience the highest population at CRCF recently than we've seen in anybody's really historical memory. It's thankfully gone back down to levels that are more acceptable, although still not optimal. But it was in the 180s, and it's now, I believe, as of today, in the 160 range. That even 160 is really too much for the facility. It's far more than the best practice, which is really, you want about 80% of general population capacity. That's the best practice across the profession. We desperately need that facility to be replaced. It's been authorized for a long time by this body, and I know that there is a belief in the need for a new facility that would meet all of the kinds of standards that we are seeing evolve in the profession, best practices, issues around restorative processes, around reentry processes. We're trying to make that happen in the facility that we have. We're working on some innovations there. But that facility is not a place that's really conducive to those kinds of best practices, nor is it as conducive as we want it to be to getting the women successful at being able to leave and frankly not come back. That's our goal. And so the need for a new facility to address that is pretty pressing.
So how did you deal, because I got a phone call and was notified that there was like 184 folks
Yeah.
at the Chittenden facility. And I was, well, how did you address that immediate overcrowding issue at the women's facility? Because you don't have the ability to move the women to
Correct.
our other facilities, and we don't ship women out of state. So
That's correct.
how was that addressed?
That was addressed at that moment by the use of what are colloquially called sled beds, additional sleeping arrangements that are inside existing cells. We were prepared to move people into the gym there and be able to use that as a space, although then, of course, it's not available for what it's supposed to be for, which is recreation and programming. We also are prepared, if necessary, to think about the need to for example, would it be feasible to move to swap, as it were, facilities if the pressure grew significantly? We didn't get to that point, thankfully. I don't think we're going to.
Facilities, you mean, in terms
Is there another location where we could move women in state that is sufficiently separate that is feasible?
So it could be another, a separate wing.
Could be a separate wing.
Our male facilities. that-
Yes. If that wing can be, but right now, part of our issue is that all of our facilities are relatively full, and there were wing closures that we were able to reopen recently owing to the recent graduations from the Correctional Academy. Those wings are now open and are now taking in men who were relatively overcrowded in the other wings of those given facilities. So for example, if there was a closed wing at Southern and you move people, you have some crowded wings and an empty wing because of staffing. Once the staffing is available, you open that empty wing, and then the overcrowded wings spill into that. You've lessened the overcrowding issue there, but you've denied yourself the ability to have a vacant wing should there be crowding issues or capacity issues at CRCF.
I know we're going to be running over a little bit, but so the victim folks could hang tight. This is a good segue into your.
So just a follow-up question.
Sorry, Martin?
Yeah, when the South Burlington facility reached that high level, the 180, whatever it was, I would really like to see what a breakdown of detainees, sentenced, and federal folks that were there. And I'd also like to understand that, if there were federal detainees, be they ICE or otherwise, I'd want to understand why they weren't refused because of capacity issues. I mean, there may be a story behind that. I'm not saying that was wrong, but I just don't. I need a little more facts to understand what happened when we really hit that high mark. I'd really appreciate if you could follow up on that.
I'd love to provide that for you. I will provide that for you, sir. I will say that the acting superintendent there, I don't know, was aware that we could say no. But I also don't know that that's what happened. It could be that there were, 8, and they're rarely more. It's usually 4 to 8 female immigration detainees. Could have been that those 8 were there and it was an influx of in-state detainees that suddenly drove that number spiking as the way it did. And that had nothing to do with an intake that could have been refused. Or it could be that was partly exacerbated by an intake that could have been refused and wasn't and will be in the future if the same situation exists.
So I guess I'd like to see the data and the story, the narrative behind what happened for what that data is. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
So this is a good segue into DOC update to this document. So Commissioner, if you can quickly just walk us through maybe
Sure.
your priorities and
Sure.
the data that's actually here.
Great. So department priorities, as seen, are staffing is the top, and health and wellness. These are the priorities that are listed in the strategic plan that was developed under Commissioner Demmel. I think it is a strong strategic plan. I see no reason to abandon it, and I see every reason to say that we're going to continue to work on the things that it seeks to achieve, and that's what you see here on this page. Next, please. The challenges to achieving those specific items are listed here. Obviously, vacancies and retention is the big one for our staffing issues. With regard to, and I think a component of that too can be seen in the DEI and justice item with regard to how are we losing people at different rates based on different demographics? And that's something that we are looking into to see the numbers, and then from there determine whether or not that's an issue for us. But we care about all these pieces. We care about the issues around the mental health needs of our incarcerated individuals, and also, for that matter, of our workforce. I think that we really want to make sure that we are offering things to our workforce too. It is, for example, a program that the department has invested a lot of time in, has a lot of support at high levels, is our relationship with the Community College of Vermont. And that CCV relationship is not just for incarcerated individuals. It's also something that's available for employees and their dependents. So the ability to get a college education is something that I think is important for retention and for making the position attractive. Modernization, Wi-Fi, really important in our facilities. A lot of these facilities are in more rural areas. Everybody knows that Vermont struggles in our rural areas with making sure that internet access is equal and fair. But we see it in our facilities as well. And if we want to improve the way, for example, that we communicate with people who have language barriers, and that's not just our immigration detainees, we have a lot of people with language barriers in our communities. How are we going to ensure that those translation services are available? We do our best, we do, but it would be facilitated greatly if we had better Wi-Fi access, certainly in intake spaces as well as in our infirmaries and hospital healthcare spaces. Simultaneously, we probably want to look into making certain that there's certain things we can do to turn Wi-Fi or internet or cell phone access off. That has recently been approved at the federal level, which is to ensure that unauthorized devices are not being used in a facility. And that's a technological piece as well. Next, please, first. This is a picture of the sentenced population, and it really does show that, as you pointed out, that we are back where we were in the days prior to the pandemic. This starts in 2021, the great decrease there. Next, but it's...
And that 860 includes the out-of-state folks.
Affirmative. That would be all of the...
700, there's always been around 120, 125.
That's correct. This is the detained population, which you can see has nearly doubled, increased significantly. And that is driven by the fact that our courts are reopening. It is driven by the fact that I believe we are seeing more in the way of crime and disorder. And it is driven by the fact that we are really trying to address situations that have been allowed to grow in ways we're not happy about in our communities. Here is a stacked chart that shows both of those two numbers together. So you can see once you have a 0 to top of the scale, some of the difference sort of becomes a little harder to discern. But that is, the orange is our incarcerated, our inmate, and the blue is the detained. And the total picture shows a much larger group. And this, I believe, is state. I don't think this includes the out-of-state.
So are you seeing any pressures different in our facilities? Are some facilities having more detained population than sentenced or vice versa? Are you seeing any pressures in any specific facilities with this breakdown of sentenced detainees?
Detainees are more likely to need movement, access to court, whether that's inside the facility or whether that's transportation by sheriffs, because they have court hearings and things, whereas most incarcerated people don't. We are not able to do the same kind of programming for detainees. It doesn't make sense, for example, to start a program that's going to be a multi-year CCV degree for somebody who may only be in the system for a handful of days or months. They do tend to be, I think that anecdotally, they can be younger. They're fresher from their crimes. They may be less familiar with the patterns of the institution and therefore more discombobulated by being in the institution in ways that can result in behavioral problems. And then also with regard to detainees, we see a greater number of people who are coming to us with substance use disorder, with the effects of mental health, et cetera, and that we haven't been able to establish long established treatment programs for, where you can with somebody who's been in the system for any number of years. That treatment is now a known commodity and becomes easier because of that knowledge. We provide treatment to everyone, irrespective of detainee status or inmate status, but it's more challenging when they're new. And it's not something that, oh, here, you've been doing this for 10 years now, and you've been with us for 10 years, and it's relatively simple for everybody involved. It's harder when it's somebody who's been with us for 5 days and we're trying to figure out a host of challenges that this person may have that haven't even been known by the individual, especially if they're coming out of a situation where they were really living in a more marginalized way with regard to healthcare.
So is there pressure from this tension with detainees and sentence folks? Is there more pressure on some of our facilities than others in terms of conflict between detainees and sentence folks?
We have, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Haley, but Marble Valley and Northwest both have larger numbers of detainees, or larger percentages rather, of detainees than some of the other facilities. So I think that they may feel some of those pressures in a more pronounced way.
Just curious. Because our detainee population has been increasing steadily. And then the other piece to that, the average time that most detainees stay is, like over a weekend, 3-4 days. That's the average. But I'm also, and we can't answer this at this point, I know, but I'm just wondering if we're seeing an increase in detainee numbers, but we're also seeing an increase in length of stay for those detainees. That I know we get the spike around the weekend time, but I'm just curious overall for the number of our detainees.
Yeah.
Their average length of stay could be 2 or 3 years before they actually go to trial. So that's taking up precious beds. And by having more detainees, it's taking more beds offline per se for sentence folks, which then puts the pressure to move them down to Mississippi. So we don't have enough beds because you can't move detainees down to Mississippi. So it's just that accumulation. Just wanted to put that on the table for people to think about. So let's keep moving.
This is a picture of the general population beds that are available, and it does sort of show that shows that challenge that you just described, ma'am. The red band is the band that is above 100, and really the profession recommends that you should not be above 85%. So the red band could go a little bit lower, and we are well outside of that. Now, this is general population, and therefore we may see differences if we look at specialized housing, segregation units, infirmary units, et cetera. But general population is the largest proportion of any given facility, and this is what we're seeing and feeling. This is females. So previously we were looking at males. This is the sentenced female population. You can see an increase there. Next, please. And then again, the same issue with females with regard to detention, except even more pronounced insofar as the actual amount. And here you see something which echoes a phenomenon that I saw certainly in policing and law enforcement, which was a greater number of female offenders. And how that's happening, why that's happening, unclear. But we see this in the detention pool. I mean, I'd like to remind this body, although you already know, of course, DOC has no input into who comes to us. And so the decision about whether or not somebody is going to be detained or incarcerated isn't really a DOC decision, with the exception of people who are violated from probation or parole. But that is a very small percentage of these. This is a determination by the court. It is a determination by the prosecution that leads to court. It's determination by the arrests that lead to prosecution. And ultimately, it's a determination by the behavior of the individuals who are offending. And this is a different picture of those female correctional beds and the capacity issues there. And I really do appreciate, Madam Chair, the fact that you pointed out that unlike that other band, although it does not look as bad as the male band that we saw, this one has no outflow for us. And really does render the need for that, for groundbreaking on a facility in Essex urgent.
Well, and half of their population is detainees. Just
Yes, I guess I need someone to explain this to me. The same with the males. When you say the female correction is oversubscribed, an average of 114% of females based on general populations in use. What does that mean exactly? If we had larger facilities, we won't hit that? What are you talking about here?
it's the use of the beds.
The number of beds. So I mentioned, for example, when the chair asked, what do we do when we get up to 180, which is a number we don't want to see again, what happens? I talked about the idea of adding beds to cells. So a cell that really has two beds that are built into the space, and in the space might get one or possibly even two additional beds that are portable temporary beds, colloquially called sled beds, that are brought in, and those would add to that head count. So what happens when you're outside that red line? You're using more and more of tools like that. Or you are putting general population people into what should have been reserved for segregated or for infirmaries less likely, but there are other parts of a facility that you want to reserve for specialized reasons, and you are unable to do that if you need the general population to go into those spaces instead.
So just to follow, so ironically, my interpretation of this is if in fact we had larger facilities, these percentages would go down, is what this stat is telling us?
Yes, if a facility with a higher capacity would mean that this problem wouldn't be as pronounced. If you took all of our women and put them into Northern and emptied Northern of men, then we would have plentiful room, because Northern is a larger facility than CRCF, and it's too large for the number of women we have. It would not be something that we would do, but that's what would happen. This chart would change drastically. The blue lines would remain the same because they're a number, but that red bar would be far above all of them. And it would be it would be under the 85% recommendation by professional best practice as well. Let me correct myself. I believe it would. I haven't crunched the actual numbers, but Northern is a sufficiently large facility that my belief is that it would.
So you really have to understand bed use. So general population beds are flexible. And it's for people who are there that don't need specialized beds. A specialized bed could be the infirmary, booking bed, could be a mental health unit. It could be closed custody. Those are not considered general population beds. General population beds is where someone is living 24/7 and they're functioning and they're involved in maybe some programming, or that's where they're living. So when you're building a facility, the standard, national standard in the correctional world is that for your general population beds, you build it so that 80 to 85% of those are used, and then you have an additional 20% general population beds that are not used, but are there to incorporate those high capacity times and then go down. So that's what that 114% is of our general population beds. We're above that 80%. Or 85%, we're using 114% of our general population beds, which we don't have.
That's better than I could have done, which is clear because I didn't do it. So yeah, I think the chair is,
We've been living it.
chair's been doing it for a very long time.
So that's when you get into looking at a new facility. What is really important is people get hung up on bed counts. But the bed count includes much more than that general population bed number. It includes the number of booking beds. It includes the number of infirmary beds. It includes the number of closed custody beds. So those are not used by a person who you're in a general population bed and that's where you're gonna live for 24/7. Those other beds are short-term and there's a lot of movement in those beds. So that's, when we start talking about replacing the women's facility, it's gonna be really important for everyone to be very clear when we start talking about bed counts, what those specific beds will be used for. And length of stay for folks. You're not gonna put someone who is sentenced and serving a 10-year sentence in a booking bed. And that's what we have to be very cognizant of. Other questions of the commissioner before we finish up and move on to the notification? Anything else, Commissioner?
Not from me. I thank you. I appreciate it. I apologize for the things that I did not know, and I will work with staff to get you the answers that I was unable to provide today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
So let's transition folks to the next item. So we did some preliminary testimony at our last meeting in September about the victim notification system. We did not have with us at the time DOC folks because folks had another previous commitment. So we wanted to offer time for DOC with the combined system, which is the victim notification system that DOC has, which is separate than the victim notification system that our state's attorney's offices have. In legislation last session, there was legislation put in that there would be a task force developed that would look into both systems and how they coordinate or do not coordinate. The victim notification task force is made up of the Commissioner of Corrections or designee, Executive Director of the Crime Victim Services, Executive Director of the State's Attorneys and Sheriffs or designee, member appointed by the Vermont Network, Victim Service Director of the State Police, 2 persons who are either victims or survivors of crime, and then a person who's familiar with the capability and operations of the bind system in corrections. And the goal of the task force is to improve victim accessibility to information, ensuring notification processes trauma-informed, expanding the use of automated notification systems, and any recommendations for necessary timing and resources. So as a follow-up to that, and also follow-up to our testimony last month, we also sent just a letter to the task force, just to lay out specifically what we were looking for, and that we're interested in learning what progress has been made in achieving those objectives. And any media reports have raised concerns about communication and functionality of the task force. We're concerned about that. And we just want to make sure that the task force is working in a collaborative nature and can report back to us on November 15th. So that's the whole gamut. I don't know how best to start. If we start with DOC first, as we didn't have a chance to hear from you folks last month. or if we start with Jennifer, Jennifer Pullman, who's the head of the task force. Haley?
I think we're flexible. DOC's presentation is more headed towards the victim services unit itself as opposed to the task force. So if you want to hear about the task force first, it might be best to have Jen lead us off.
Okay, so why don't we start with you, Jen, and then after that, we can go into DOC, their system, how Vine works. And then how it coordinates with the state's attorneys. Victim notification system. So, Jen, you go.
And last time Tim and I were at the table together, I don't know what would be best for the committee.
If you both could identify yourself.
Good morning. My name is Jennifer Pullman. I'm the Executive Director of Vermont Center for Crime Victim Services.
Tim Leaders-Dumont, Executive Director of the Department of State's Attorneys and Sheriffs.
All yours, you received our letter from the committee.
Yes, and we greatly appreciate that letter. Certainly appreciate this committee's interest in the issue of victim notification and improving it. And, just it's a great carryover from the work that was done, especially in house corrections and institutions and then in house judiciary to focus on this really critical issue of getting it right. I do want to say that the group is really robust. The membership is very active and we have a lot of participation from non-members as well. I know Senator Plunkett, your advocate, shows up for all of the meetings and her participation is much valued. So I'm going to report briefly on the progress and have Tim chime in. We have made a great deal of progress and again, the letter was much appreciated. One of the pieces I want to flag just briefly because I think it'll be a great tool for this body and it's been a tool for us and thank the Department of Corrections. They basically put together a wonderful chart that shows all like the life of a case and it shows all the different exactly. And this has been much needed. Other agencies, entities contributed to that, but Haley, Summer and Jenna Bennett really took this on. And I think it's going to be a wonderful tool for the General Assembly moving forward and certainly has helped us in our work.
So this chart, which is in our packet, that includes everything beyond the bond, or is it just, no, it's because I'm looking arrested of offender intake, and then bail or bond, and then the court. So it only tracks the DOC system, correct? This chart only tracks where Vine connects.
Yeah, I believe that, sorry, Tim Leaders-Dumont for the record, we haven't had time to fully sort of flesh out the state's attorney overlay within that chart, but it's a really helpful framework. And I think a good place for us to sort of plug in some of the gaps. I mean, one of the things we brought up at the meeting was most folks are given a citation, right? Most folks are actually not detained in Vermont. And that's an important thing just when we're producing public information that then will be on your website to just remind Vermonters, most people are not detained in a facility. If not, you need many more facilities. Most people are cited. And so we will work with DOC on updating that as a part of our MOU process, which I'll get to it.
So this is, as it said, a draft, and it's being presented to the task force for the task force to really refine it and clarify.
We have seen it and basically the Department of State's attorneys and sheriffs are really the entity at this point that would be, giving that feedback to finalize that process. One of the pieces we jumped into, and this was flagged for this actual committee back in October when survivors did testify in front of you and talked about that gap between when somebody is cited, arrested, and then is yet not in DOC custody. And we've taken that on and had a lot of success with that. One of the pieces that we focused on is providing or enhancing the tool that we already provide for law enforcement to meet their obligations under 13 VSA 5314. That law, and I did provide that on the committee page, but basically outlines what law enforcement have to do in terms of providing information to victims and survivors. And the center for over 2 decades has come up with various materials to provide law enforcement as a helpful tool. So what the task force did was we dug down, and that is in your packet, dug down and updated the form that exists. And one of the pieces that we noticed, and I do want to also emphasize that Disability Rights Vermont was a part of this process every step of the way. So this has been vetted by them. We realized that the form that we just had did not have any information about VINE, offender locator, a number where a victim survivor could reach out to find that information. So we made that very significant update. This is supposed to be a one-page handout, but that very significant update to this form. We've already developed a rollout plan for this process, including involving the Criminal Justice Training Council. Vermont State Police has been on board the whole time, but it's really reaching those municipalities. So again, reaching out to the Criminal Justice Training Council, speaking to the Police Academy, which already we train on this form. The network volunteered to include this in their domestic violence training that every single law enforcement officer has to undergo each year. The SAs and their victim advocates have said that they will do due diligence in their counties to get this out there. And the Vermont State Police Victim Services Unit is developing a training for all law enforcement on utilizing this. One other piece that I want to note is that we discovered in our conversation that the booking packet that is handed over from law enforcement to the booking entity doesn't include necessarily victim information. If it does, if it is, it's buried somewhere, but there's no obvious place that that victim information is standing out. So Amy Farr from the Vermont State Police is working with her folks. She's in the process of developing a cover sheet that would be accompany that large booking packet that would have that victim contact information right there, right up front, hard to miss. And so we expect to have that, in a final form by the 15th date of our report. One question for us, though, that we're going to consider is that there is no statutory obligation for anybody to be providing this level of notification around the VINE system prior to it going into the situation where DOC has custody. And whether or not that obligation should be added to 5314, we haven't determined, but it's certainly something that we're thinking about. And again, it would be included in the form that as we train law enforcement, it's all you have to do is provide this form. And we do know that, and Meredith might speak to this, she's been working with Amy Farr so that VSP, Victim Services Unit, will have a back end into VINE so that they can help enter that information. They can put notes in the system, and also VSP, Victim Services Unit, will be helping their officers to register victims if they're seeking to do that at the time. So there's been great work been happening with DOC and the state police. With respect to the forms, that we've made a great deal of progress on. Obviously, the conversation was, and the goal was to create a system where the forms, the language was trauma-informed, victim-centered, accessible, both in terms of ability to read and understand, but also language accessibility. We have one form, one email text left to finalize, but we have gone through with DOC, disability rights, a whole host of victim advocates, DOC staff, and have really gotten to a place where the language is something that we're very happy with. We have had some conversations. I know Ashley Fisk is involved in this, but changing the release notification date from 30 days to 60 days. We have heard from survivors 30 days is enough. We need more time, and certainly the department was amenable to that. It was just about a conversation with VINE, and also about on that release notification, having actual resources be populated so that you have that information, the person's being released, and then there's a population area where you could put in, these are the resources that are available to you, and then a phone number, but also just a resource directory. So those pieces are being added. We are looking at the text messaging function because we want the messages in the text to read similar to the email, but there's a character limitation. So DOC is looking to work with VINE so that there can be a link embedded in the text so that we have the same information going out, because otherwise the text messages necessarily have to be pretty abrupt. So there's exploration of that. So we're encouraged about that opportunity as well. And then language accessibility is still a little bit of a question. Vine has the ability to provide translation 24/7 in about 260 plus languages. I should say interpretation, I'm sorry. As far as the translation of materials, currently Vermont only has the only non-English language is Spanish. That is not one of the dominant non-English languages. The center has 12 different languages that we produce in our forms, and we provided that information to the Department of Corrections and also to a victim survivor who's also contracted with Vine to get an idea of what that cost will be. And I understand from DOC there's some hesitancy because they've already fixed their budget. But from our perspective, I mean the centers, we've done that ourselves and it's not very expensive and it's a one-time cost. So my hope is that I won't be going it alone if I'm advocating for because providing a right without providing accessibility is just checking off a box. And we have to reflect the reality of what non-English speaking what the preferences look like in Vermont. So that's a conversation we'll be having on the 16th as well. And then last time Tim and I were here, we noted that there had been the change to the earned time notification law, that it was more of an active notification, no less than 90 days. And that that information had not been shared at that time with victims and survivors. The department is working on this, and perhaps Meredith will speak to it. They put together a new packet that they are working on. They're also working on language that would be shared with already registered victims and survivors, and they'll be sharing that language with the task force on the 16th. So there's progress in that area as well. Well, with communication, I will turn it over to Tim because one of the two pieces that we're looking at are the MOU and the database conversation. I do just want to say, and not just because he's here, I've worked with 6 different executive directors of the department, and by far, Tim is the most invested in supporting his victim advocates and in supporting victim survivor voice. So it's really been a pleasure to work with him throughout his tenure here. So I will, with that being said, I will turn it over to Tim on the communication piece.
Oh, thank you. I didn't pay her to say that.
No.
Tim Leaders-Dumont for the record. And I will say, yeah, we've had, in terms of study committees, worked on summer and fall study committees since 2014, interacting with this building. It's one of the most active groups of treasurer's office, state's attorneys, sheriffs. It's one of the most active summer, fall study committees I've ever been a part of. I think our department made the decision to have a combined approach rather than just having me be the sole person. There's a self-selected group of victim advocates with 100 years of experience, really, who are participating in these meetings from the field. So all of my input is informed by their input at the field level. And that's very important to the way our department functions, where our victim advocates are really at the table at statewide conversations. And they've been great. And I will recognize them just on the record because they're not here, they're in court. But Megan Place from Windsor County, Karen Burns from Chittenden County, Tammy Loveland from Bennington County are just an incredible group. And Holly Leach also has joined from Washington County. Am I missing anyone else?
Yes, you are.
Yes,
I'm
I know
trying
I
to
am
think
as
you're going
well.
to be in trouble.
Yeah, and Shay Kennedy from
Yes.
Rutland County. I was going to say Ali Jolly and Shay because they both participated at different times from Rutland. But it's been a really proactive group, and they've been very active with DOC as well. So when they send out something to me, I get it out to that group. So that communication has improved even since the last time we were here a month ago. Another piece that's, I think, very important for us is advocating. Budgets are limited, we understand that, but in terms of one of the menu options that we think should be a part of the equation is the earned time credit. It is a statutory right, but you have to opt into it. You have to engage with DOC. So it's not binary. There has to be engagement with the victim. So we believe that in the Vine's notification system, you should be able to say, yes, I want this if the person's convicted, or no, I do not want this if the person's convicted. And so I think they're considering that. They can respond. The Department of Corrections can respond on that. That's a really important menu option because it's not a binary. It's yes, I do. No, I don't. I want these notifications, et cetera. We heard that feedback as well from testimony that you received, Madam Chair. Another piece that I think is important that we're working on, again, knowing that budgets can be a constraining factor, is the IT side of this. So we're very much in favor of a system where opt-in from our side of things, our case management system, translating that to the DOC system so people would know the self-identified victims that have said, yes, you can contact me and here's my information if the offender is convicted. What I picture with my, central office perspective is a file that we would send to DOC with the people who have opted in upon conviction. So it'll be a little bit of back and forth in terms of what that looks like. I hope that we can get that done. And we're in favor of that during our own case management system transition. So we're working on that actively with Krista. Yes, thank you.
So can I just interject there for victim notification? Would a victim feel different? They're going through the state's attorney, working through the courts to be notified. And then once the person, the defendant, is convicted and then sentenced, is it also the feeling that the victim would also still want to be notified once that person's incarcerated?
That's what we're trying to ensure that we can understand at the onset. So for example, victim advocate talking with someone, maybe at the midpoint of a case, for example, a status conference, or maybe even a pre-trial getting towards the end. Hey, let's just check in for a second. You had initially told us that you are okay with DOC reaching out to you and us giving them your contact information. That consent, it's really a consent conversation about data. From us building that into our practices is going to be on us. And I think we're ready to make sure we do that because it will help with our communication style and what we already know with DOC. So that if a victim says to DOC, I didn't want to be contacted, we can then point them back to, you did inform the state's attorney that you did want to be contacted. So it'll help them, give them some cover, give us some cover. And it's a binary option. I do or I do not want my contact information forwarded. There's still the rights side that DOC then has to struggle with. It just makes the world a little easier for the compliance with their rights piece if we've obtained that consent from the victim. And that's a training piece for us, low-hanging fruit training, but training piece for us if we get that done.
Victims don't know the difference. I mean,
That's
I
correct.
don't say this in a mean way, but it's so confusing in terms of the judicial piece in DOC. Many people think it's all one and the same.
Absolutely. We've said during many of the meetings, the victim doesn't care what part of state government that they're interacting with. They just want to know that they can reach out to somebody. The other thing that we're working on next week, we're going to have a whole party over at 110 State Street. If anyone wants to stop by, we're working on the MOU for this handoff and the relationship between state's attorneys and DOC. So that'll be hopefully an attachment, even if it's not perfect by November 15th, it'll be an attachment to the report, even if it's in draft form, of the roles and responsibilities of state's attorneys, victim advocates, Department of Corrections, victim advocates, also outlining the law enforcement responsibilities, which you've heard about today. Having really, I would picture Commissioner Murad and myself being two of the signatories to that MOU, and having it published on both of our websites and be a part of our training materials as well for our different sets of employees. So we're working on that. We're excited to be working on that. It's going to be a good thing going forward.
So it seems like the task force, in terms of where you've progressed, in terms of working together as a cohesive task force, as well as really making some progress in making changes on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is the most progress and where you've made agreements and clarifying where the holes were, and 1 being no progress at all. Where would you put that?
I would put it as of right now, with hopes for next week and beyond, at about a 7.
I was going to say a 7 as well.
Where were you about 2 months ago, do you think?
I'd rather not say.
Focus on the future. I think for me, the one remaining outstanding issue that I think needs to be more fully vetted is the menu. You noted in your letter, we want to maximize choice, and the department had spoken, and they'll speak to this, I'm sure, that it didn't seem as necessary to have a menu since the only remaining notifications that are provided because they are statutorily obligated to do so. So last time Tim and I were here, you heard the 2 voluntary notifications were unilaterally eliminated. And so the question was, is that necessary? There is another area of law in terms of parole hearings. It's 28 VSA 507, where a victim can affirmatively waive their notification of a parole hearing. So there are two areas where there's an optional piece, but I did note that in Title 13, with respect to Tim's programming, a victim can decline any service from a victim advocate. In Title 28, we don't have that language. So we've only just started this conversation, but it's something to think about because certainly, again, optimizing victim choice, providing those options is really paramount for me and for many others. So I like the idea of going with a menu. I think it's important. And who knows what the future holds, what this body may do in terms of other changes. So I think building in the menu, reinstituting it was where I land, but that's kind of where I'm still at that 7, because I think that that's a significant area that needs to be fleshed out.
And we'll also identify gaps, Madam Chair, between where the rights are and also maybe where stuff that we're just doing it. It's not in law, but we're just doing this thing to help victims. Probably DOC can identify a bunch of those. I know we can identify a bunch of those. And I know a lot of our victim advocates, because cases take a long time, looking at representative, cases take a long time, the way our system is currently set up. And so we develop very long, years-long professional engagements with victims, and with DOC that can last for decades. And so that level of intimacy with people who've been impacted by crime means that we have to go above and beyond whatever's in the statute. So it's about making reasonable efforts to ensure victims' rights are accomplished and that people are reasonably informed about what's going to happen next. Because that's, if you sum all this up, a lot of it is what's going to happen next, providing them with detail about things that have already happened, but what's going to happen next. Unfortunately, victims of crime know our criminal justice system almost better than anybody else. So it's about explaining the system so that they feel comfortable. Because a lot of times folks are going to come back and complain to the two people here and the person sitting over there, the system failed me. And even if the system failed them, effectuating their rights is what we are all at the table for. And I want to thank everyone here for putting us at that table. Truly, I don't know that we would have been here without putting the pen to paper on. Task force don't always accomplish what we've already done here, but it's not mission accomplished at all yet. There's a lot more to do.
So are you seeing, I'm just thinking of our legislative timeframe, are you seeing recommends to update certain sections of statute? Because I'm just thinking of our timeframe. If we don't have a vehicle currently in the bill that's on the wall that we could use, we might have to introduce.
I plan to flesh out with the group next week, and I've given them some warnings as we've been, again, peeling back the layers of the onion around whether we want to include broader language in 28 that gives victims more choice on which rights they want to opt into and opt out of. And I want to look at 13 BSA 5314 that speaks to law enforcement obligations. So those are two pieces that are top of mind for me.
So for members of the committee here, if there is some proposed changes that come from you folks and DOC from the task force for changing statute, we can make that recommendation. We can also, members from the Senate, members from the House could introduce, put in a drafting request to Ben to go forward with introducing, drafting up a bill. So we could do that. So I'll put that on the table for members to be thinking about.
Be great. And I expect we'll talk about this at our meeting on the 16th, and we'll be ready with some specificity on for the 15th. I don't want to keep suggesting Meredith is going to talk about something, but I do want to acknowledge that DOC has undergone or is undergoing a really significant overhaul of all their coding system, because the codes trigger the notifications, and we've heard some concerns about erroneous notifications or blank notifications. So they are really digging in deep to that technology piece. And I know Meredith and her team are really excited to start training, because we don't really realize how much the average, DOC staff person does a lot of this victim notification. So that's a role that they are really excited to take on. And then just one other piece I wanted to mention, because we've uncovered so much that we didn't really think about before. we're going to do a little bit more in terms of an intro for victims, like what to expect. Because one of the things we realized is that at no point is there an explicit conversation with victims and survivors about what happens with your information, who sees it. And building that into, some of the materials. I know Meredith and her team are working on that. But just some of the upfront information for somebody who's all of a sudden, now I'm in a new system, as Tim was referring to. What does this mean? But, we're asking for this information, but what happens with it? So just some real basic stuff in terms of our communication and interaction, we're really drilling down on. So I'm really so proud to be working with these committed people. They show up, everybody's passionate, they're prepared, and it's been a lot of work. But it's been great work, and appreciate the committee support. And I'll defer to my colleagues who can speak more into the weeds. But we're to 7 now. We're doing well.
You've done a great job as chair. I just want to say that.
You're in a real different place than we were back in May. Yes, that's for sure.
Well, sometimes letters can help with that too.
Any questions of these folks before we bring DOC up to the table? Before we move on. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So bring up DOC, bring up as many people as you can, and you can grab chairs. And the bind system is run by DOC. The bind system is for folks or folks who from senates. Does it also detainees? Do you also keep that as a back of your mind? This is it's the bind system. It's operated by DOC.
Good morning.
In DOC. Okay.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Meredith Pelkey, and I'm the Director of Victim Services.
My name is Krista Murray. I'm the Director of Operational Systems.
And today I've actually brought my whole team here, so I'd like to introduce them. Claudia Merib is one of the VSSs, which is a Victim Service Specialist. Karen Holmes is another one. And then we have Ashley Fisk, who's also our Senior Victim Service Specialist.
And where did the victim service specialists work out of? Are they out of central office or are they around the state?
They are around the state. Ashley is in central office, but she also covers Barry. Yeah, yeah. So as you can see, we have a tiny team with a big, huge job to do. So I just wanted to point out, like, we rely on our probation and parole officers and our caseworkers to also do victim notification and victim work. The second thing I want to point out is that the services we do in the victim services for the Department of Corrections is we share information, we talk and plan around release with victims. We support during parole hearings. If they want to write a letter, if they want to be present, we support them in that. And also we are doing restorative justice work as well. And so I'm going to dive into that a little further later. We also create trainings for our staff. And I'm really proud of a training that we've helped develop called Survivor-Centered Communication. And we did that with the help of the network and also with victims. And we have victims who actually are part of presenting that training to our staff. So I think that's very innovative, and I'm super proud that we've been able to do that. So one part of what we do as well is we manage, and Ashley manages the victim, the VINE system, which is victim information notification every day. And that we really instituted that to help us meet our statutory obligations to notify victims. So it's a helpful tool, but it's not. It's just a piece of what we do. We actually notify victims of parole hearings by calling them. So, and that's not done by just my unit. Again, we're a tiny unit, but we rely on our staff to do that as well. Next slide. So, you know, in partnership with the task force, we've been able to really, I think Jen spoke to it. We've done some really great work and we've updated our language, which I think was super necessary. And I'm glad we're focusing a lot of our attention on doing that. We're also talking about our email notifications, what those look like, the text notifications, which I think maybe Krista could speak a little bit more to, or maybe Ashley, okay. And also the messages. So when people sign up for Vine via phone, you know, we have to really think about the language we're using and the length of the call. So that's similar to the text notifications. It depends on what carrier you have for cell phone, how those notifications come in. So it's a complicated system to kind of figure out how we're going to do that. But I think the language change has been really helpful. So it's great. Next.
So a lot of your, and I just want to bring this to the attention of the committee members, a lot of how you operate Vine in DOC is driven by your directive.
Yes.
We do have this directive, and it was effective in May of 22.
Yes.
So with some of these changes that you're all working on, talking about, are you going to have to update this directive?
Yes, we will update our directives.
I want to bring that to the committee's attention because we did have that document.
Next slide. Okay, so there are two programs that we offer specifically to the Victim Services Unit that I kind of wanted to highlight for everybody. One of them is our Victim Offender Dialogue Program. And currently we have 4 people in the department who are trained to do that. One of them is Karen, one is Ashley, and 2 of them are from our restorative justice unit. And so I'm gonna I want to pass out our brochure that we're going to be sending to victims when we do our introduction. And the second brochure is our apology letter bank, which Karen and Claudia have been instrumental in updating. We run the only apology letter bank in the state. So it's super important, and updating it is something I'm really happy we've been able to focus some of our efforts on. One other program I do just want to highlight is we have an exhibit called Saving a Place at the Table. And that's something that our unit specifically does as well.
So are these, just looking at these, I'm going to take a step back. Is this given to offenders as well as victims at all?
No, but we do talk about it in our restorative processes. We talk about the apology letter bank. And actually Karen and Claudia have been talking about actually going into our facilities and talking to incarcerated individuals about what an apology letter is and what a good apology letter would look like. So that's some of the work we're hoping to do.
So these are new initiatives that you've put together?
We've always had the apology letter bank, but it's kind of not been robust because I don't think a lot of people know about it. So, you know, some of the conversations we've been having are like, if someone doesn't know this exists, how are they going to be able to ask us for? So sending these brochures out to victims and is going to be a new thing that we're going to be doing. Yeah. Do we want to just go, can we bring this up again? So this timeline that has been created by DOC that I know we haven't gone too far into it, but I did want to just highlight, it shows how Vine could be utilized, along the criminal justice continuum and how it's utilized now. So it talks about where there are notifications and, also, I think it points out, who's responsible or who has authority for those notifications.
So this is the current, like, I'm just looking, I'm going down, bail bond posted.
Yeah,
Okay, so Vine could give, and you do this now,
yes,
bail notification,
yes,
and then SAVA is your state's attorneys,
yes.
victim advocate. And then when you say DOC, no authority, so what does that mean?
That means we are not,
Yeah.
yeah, actually,
Actually, if you could just identify yourself.
Actually, specialist. I helped create this. This is just a rough draft. We really just wanted to see where Vine could notify, and then a lot of times, as far as the no authority, victims want to know like who makes that decision. So in this case, we just wanted to show that we don't have the authority to make any decisions on the court side. And so that's all it was. It was,
Okay.
We don't make those decisions.
And the same with held without bail or bond.
Right.
There's different. So this is reflecting, I want clarity here. This is reflecting current practice.
Yes, it is just rough, very rough.
Right, so this is, would this be a person? So the top of the chart is all detainees? Pretty much? Because you're talking arrest, offender
Yeah.
intake, bail
Yes.
bond,
Yep.
court. And so this is for detainees,
Yes.
the top part.
Yes, and I know that there's a lot that happens, and I don't know exactly how that happens when, like, there's a citation or they're, sent to a facility or, I don't know all the details of that part, but it was mostly to show like what we can do and what we are responsible for, and where Vine can plug in.
So
that information.
if a detainee is released, if you go down to the court and you go on the screen to the left, pretrial release, so they were a detainee, then the court releases them. It will then notify.
if they're registered in Vine.
Right, and we would have, they would be released from us, and so once they get that, once we book them out, then that's when the notification go out from Vine saying that they've been registered.
The victim.
Yes, if they were registered to receive the notifications.
So it's up to the victim to register for Vine. And then that's what we need to really make clear, that the victim has, they may think they've already registered for victim notification when they went through with the state's attorney, not realizing they have to re-register with DOC.
Right. Or it could be not even through state's attorney, it could be through, the state police. So they would have to know this system exists, and that's what I think the form Jen, was talking about is super important.
We have handed out, Tara, there are little cards with information, that officers can just give to victims. It's like a little pocket-sized card that walks them through, how to register, because they can register on the community side as well.
So if a person is detained, continues to be detained, you go to the right-hand side there. Vine will notify the victim that the person has been returned to custody and stays in custody. So then if you go down to when a person is sentenced, if they're released on probation or deferred, Vine would notify. If they are incarcerated, Vine would notify that they're returned to custody. And then if they're incarcerated, the victim would be notified in terms of if the person's released and what that status of release is. Yes. If they've been on probation or deferred, Vine would notify the victim if it's absconded
Yes.
or discharged from community supervision or returned to an incarcerated offender.
Yes.
But it's all based on the victim saying yes to bind, that they want to be notified. Does the victim have an opportunity to say, yes, I want to be notified for if they've absconded? But I don't want to be notified for other things. Do they have that opportunity to do that?
Well, they don't, they have that opportunity, through us, through DOC, but not necessarily through an automated notification.
So they would have to call you physically?
Yes, because we don't, I think Jen spoke a little bit about the menu options. So there isn't the ability to do that currently, except that there is through us, which we kind of prefer because we really want to develop those relationships. And I think it's important that we be able to have that in-person conversation, because sometimes those conversations are tricky and also there's a lot of nuance.
We also have the statutory obligations. So if they sign up, then they get, that's statutorily required.
We do have a part of, that we all have access to the back end, there's a note section. And so what we would do is if we had a conversation with the victim and they said, we only want to be notified of someone or release, we would put a note in there, and what it would say is, Krista Murray is the victim of this docket. She only wants to be notified of some. And so when we train our staff to, when they're reaching out to victims to go into Vine to get that information, we train them so they are looking at the bottom, the whole page, because there is information there for those victims that may not want to be automated.
And that's why it's super important that our state's attorneys, victims advocates, they also have access to the back end. And I know Jen spoke a little bit about this Vermont State Police Victim Services Unit also having access to the back end, so they could put in a note. So if a victim did not want automated notifications, the victim advocate could put that note in there, and then DOC would have that information, and we would know we need to call this person instead of signing them up for Vine.
There's so many levels.
I know.
That's what really concerns me, because the victim is just sometimes overwhelmed with everything. Do you ever get pushback from the person who's incarcerated or detained that, hey, I don't want this information going to the victim? Do you ever get that pushback at all?
Offenders know about Vine, and honestly, the only thing that I've ever gotten in the 20 years of doing this is someone didn't like that their information wasn't correct in Vine. But never that the victim got too much. I never had anybody, any offender reach out or brief that. I know you do know about it, but they.
We deny such a grievance.
Anything else?
So, I mean, I think Krista's our tech person, so it's maybe a great opportunity for her to just talk a little bit about the enhancements and the work that her team has been doing to improve Vine.
I'm cognizant of lunchtime too. So-
Yes.
So,
I'll be quick.
go ahead. Be brief. Succinct and brief. I have a lot of questions.
So the history of Vine, I just want to go into that real quick. So when it was operationalized with our current offender management system, which is the system in which all of our incarcerated and supervised individuals' information lives in, that system has an integration with Vine. So it is the one that's notifying Vine that these things are happening to trigger the notifications from Vine. So it was clunkier before it is now. It used to be a lot better back several years ago. People who went into the booking positions at facilities, there was a robust training. But with the staffing turnover, we haven't been able to actually, I mean, we're putting whoever we have available into booking. So that's caused some of the problems that we have faced with this. So my staff are currently working on a training. So that, because also the training was different at each place. So we're working to ensure that the training is accurate, is encompassing of everything. And will be vetted through staff before that rolls out. And then staff at facilities will be trained, and then we'll do a train the trainer model. We've also are identifying as we're doing that ways in which to improve the way the interface happens with Vine to get more accurate notifications, going out. We're also working directly with Vine to change the system in the way in which we're sending data to it and how it's reading the data. The data in the system was heavily reliant on booking release codes. So these codes they've been released, final release to bail or at court. But they're also used in the transfer from facility to field and back and forth. And the system relies on those to trigger different types of notification and the wording within it. So we're working to eliminate that reliance so that the system is accurate in the notifications that it is providing to victims. And so to the point that Tim had on, the integration of their matrix case management system. The challenge with integrating the system is one, the matching of the data between the matrix system and Vermont DOC system. Identifying and ensuring that we are matching it properly. However, it would have to come into our offender management system, and we do not store victim information in our offender management system, rightfully so because of access for that. So if we were to get victim information from Matrix, we can't consume it. And we do not send victim information to Vine. The victim has to go on to Vine and sign up for it. So that integration, while it's great, like in theory, with the lack of us storing victim information where people can access it, is the challenge. So I wanted to speak to that point as well.
So it seems like the feeling I have is you really depend on that electronic system for the notification to victims. It's not really a hands-on person doing it. It's the system and the coding and the triggers.
And also too, it's a tool, we don't want it to completely take away from the human aspect of the victim services unit, making that connection. So to me, as being a victim myself at one point, while I'm getting a text message, it still would, frighten me, and I would want to actually reach out and have a human connection with somebody. So, it's a tool, and it's only as good as,
Enters into it. So
right.
would a victim be able to go to one of these two folks in that part of the state for a person to person?
Yes. Yes.
Does that happen a lot?
Yes, it's a lot of the work they do, and it's a small team and they do phenomenal work.
And I believe the notifications have the number, your guys' number right on it.
Yes, yes,
The apology letter,
yes.
does that ever play a role in these deals that are made so that a person doesn't go to trial and make a deal and a lot of things are dropped and certain things are kept?
No,
So this letter can't be used that way.
no.
I mean, those letters could be sent to us and we would vet them to see if they were appropriate to be in the apology letter bank. And a victim could request that letter, but I have not seen that happen.
So it's not used in plea deals.
No.
Vendors might think it can be, but it's not.
Yeah.
They know sometimes they may say that they'll write a letter once they're incarcerated because they think that maybe it will help with programming or help something else, but it's not. It's just an accountability letter, or apology letter and
To the victim.
to the victim, yeah. Yep. They don't get to use it.
So with the apology letter bank, I noticed that the victim's notified. Do they have to opt into that notification or like they?
It's not an automatic notification.
Okay.
They would have to know about it and contact us. Right now, that's the system we
The
have.
victim would have to know about the apology letter bank, not that their offender had written an apology. You guys don't say, hey, your abuser just wrote an apology letter. Okay, good.
We store those, so that information it's not in our offender management system, so it wouldn't be automated. There's no doubt. We keep that. Victim services.
The apology letter
We
is
keep
kept
the
for
apology
victims.
letter.
It just seems there's so many areas for disconnect or misinformation or misinterpretation.
Yeah.
That's what I'm.
Yeah, and it's so important we have that communication. I think that's why this task force is so powerful, is that it's really going to help us establish like how we communicate along the whole justice continuum, right? That's what my hope is. Like, how do we ensure that victims know what their rights are along the way? I just wanted to, if nobody has any more questions, I just have one more thing I want to mention. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Part of what my team does is awareness campaigns within our department. And October 16th is Wear People Day to honor and remember victims of domestic violence. And so we brought some ribbons if you guys want to participate in that campaign.
October 16th is next week for today.
Thank you.
Anything else, folks? Great. Well, we always run over, so it's time for lunch. So let's take our lunch break and we'll be back at 1 o'clock. We're going to be talking about encourage diversion update. And Martin, we will wait. I know you're driving back down and we'll make sure you're here when we start this conversation because I know it's really important for you to be here.
All right, I'm on my way.